If you'd like to tweet Future of News during our conversation, feel free to do that. There actually will not be a Q&A portion because we have 10 executives we're going to talk with. So what we see this today is it is a touch point of an ongoing conversation that NABJ is constantly having with newsroom executives, right? So this is a touch point, and one of the tasks that we see our role at NABJ is to continue to assist with pipelining and in making introductions for all of you to the great men and women that work across the news industry, right? So this is a continuum conversation, but we want to jump in. So we're excited to have the president of CBS News, Susan Zirinsky, with us. Give her a round of applause. And I must give her a special hat tip because on Miss Z's very first day, she accepted my invitation to meet with her. And I will never forget that you thought high enough of NABJ and me that we could have a meeting on your first day as president. So thank you.
I was scared of you. I had to have you. Are you kidding?
I'm lovable. No, I'm good people. And Dean Baquet, the executive editor of the New York Times. Longtime member and supporter of NABJ. We love you. And Matt Murray, editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal. Yay, Matt. And James Goldston, the president of ABC News. So one of the things that...
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
I need a reintroduction.
I know. Lesson learned, you need your fan club, right? So don't forget to tweet, Future of News. I'll be watching Twitter timeline as I'm talking. And just so you know, we are going to rapid fire in this conversation. After these four esteemed executives have our chat, we're going to peel on to a whole nother group. So get excited, get ready. And I'm sure you should know that their staffs are in the audience. So really quickly, I'm going to have a show of hands. Where are our CBS folks? Okay? Where are our New York Times crew? Over here. Okay, Wall Street Journal. Okay. And we got ABC News. Okay. So if you want to connect, if you'd like to connect around jobs and get more information about these organizations, you can kind of head to that way. And Michelle Miller will be taking on phase 2 of this discussion. And I will be departing the stage. So it's nice to see everyone. If you want to get in contact with me, nabjpresident21@gmail. We're jumping in. Here we go. So NABJ began meeting with broadcast executives over the past year to take our conversation around convention partnership to another level. So the majority of our conversations were about what's happening this week at the convention. And we wanted to expand that, so we were talking about creating real strategies to build pipelines and engage with members and also make sure that we're meeting partner needs. So a part of all of that, we want to know, NABJ, we want to know what is it that you're looking for in a workforce today? What is it you're looking for in the most talented journalists among the 4,000 that are walking around these halls, or even what you're looking forward to at fourth quarter this year or even next year? What are the skills that you would love to see in journalist potential hires? Oh, I'm looking at James, so I'm going with James.
Start. Well, first off, sorry, I will just say I think the engagement with the NABJ and those conversations have actually been very useful and positive, and we've enjoyed them. And I think long may they continue. I think that dialogue's really important to us. In terms of what we're looking for, the first thing I will say, I think at a time when we know the journalism environment is changing really, really fast, and we know there are a lot of parts of the ecosystem that are struggling. I think we're actually at an interesting moment here, particularly on the broadcast side, where we've kind of had a radio era, we've had a linear television era, we've had a kind of cable news era, and now I think we're at the kind of nascent stage of the streaming era. And I think that's going to be defining probably for everyone on this stage is what happens in that era. But I think in terms of for all the people here, there are tremendous opportunities that come from that. We'll be hiring 100+ jobs in the next 3 or 4 months. So go visit our booth. We're hiring now, and I think in terms of what we're looking for, we're looking for, obviously we want core journalistic skills. We want obviously integrity is really important, a good ethical basis is important, and people that have got good creative storytelling vision. That's what we want.
Misty?
Look, I think that, first of all, we really have an affinity with this organization. And I think that for us, what we're really looking for are solid core journalists. But one of the most important things that we feel that we carry as the baton and the legacy of CBS is storytelling and great writing, distinctive voices. This is why we have a relationship with this organization, because that pipeline of helping us find people who are fabulous writers. It's writing, it's writing, it's writing. And for us, we've always distinguished ourselves with amazing writers. I work with correspondents 10, 20 years ago, and I'm still using their lines. So for us, it's the core, as Goldston said, it's the core value of good, solid journalism. For us, it's distinctive storytelling. It's the writing. And it is to be at the table. With somebody at an event yesterday said, it's that diversity is being invited in, inclusion is getting to dance. And by looking at this, and the people in this room, you have to be on the front lines of our storytelling, because that's the only way we are going to be a united country. We are living in very strange times. Yeah. Nobody will disagree with that one. And so for us, it's about core journalism, it's about writing, and it's about reflecting who we are and who we need to look like. You need to be at the table.
Thank you. Matt?
Thanks. It's great to be here. And can you hear me okay? Is this working? I
didn't feel like my mic was working either.
How's this? That's better. Of course, I echo the journalistic values and the integrity, which is very important for us. Look, a couple of other things I would think about. Flexibility is really important. I'm sure there's a lot of talk here in the hallways, as there is in the industry these days, about the challenges for the industry. But in some ways, it's never been a more exciting time to become a journalist and join an organization today, like the Journal, like the Times, or like the networks, because there's so many pathways to success. So if you're a reporter, I want somebody who can demonstrate that they can break scoops, who's curious, who can find stuff out, who can find original things out. But if you're a programmer, I want somebody who's got great new ideas about how to deliver news to the audience. I want art people who can tell stories visually in a way that news organizations like mine haven't traditionally done very well. And over the course of your careers today, the opportunities in the newsroom are going to continue to change and evolve and grow. And it's a really exciting ecosystem if you want to be part of that. So I'd be looking for also people who are excited to take that on, and excited for a place like the Wall Street Journal, both to learn about how we do things, but also bring ideas about how we should change what we do, and bring new ideas and bring new perspectives and new voices to take us to a different level and reinvent ourselves. I think that's important. The culture of the news organization and the people we bring in is going to write the future of news in the Wall Street Journal as much as I or my senior editors are. I want people who are going to come in and really contribute to that and make it an exciting time for us.
Thanks, Dean.
Is mine on?
No.
Borrow collective. We're in newspapers, which is what I feel most comfortable talking about, because this is my fifth one, are in the middle of the greatest transformation in the craft that we've ever seen, and it's not done. I mean, the newsroom that I walked into in the late 1970s in New Orleans, there were like three jobs. There were editors, there were reporters, there were photographers. I'm probably the first executive editor of the New York Times who can hardly do the jobs of most of the people there. We have a television show, we have a podcast. It's just a very different place, and it's going to keep changing. Mm-hmm. And since my own view is that a lot of print newspapers are going to stop printing in the next decade or so, the places are going to look dramatically different. So my advice would be, first, you have to understand and hold on to the core values. that's not going to change. The core values, which are curiosity, empathy, I mean, the kind of empathy that allows you to talk to people who you don't understand and try to figure out a way to translate them, because that's an important part of it. Ambition, because I think the best journalism, whether it's small or large, comes from some editor or reporter who wants to do something bigger than he or she was assigned to do. And I think, as Matt said, open-mindedness. I think you have to go in understanding that the way you do things will change, and that you have to work really hard to understand the difference between the things that you do that are sort of traditions, and some of those you can shed, and the things that are core values. And sometimes it's hard to tell a difference. But to me, empathy, flexibility, and excitement about what I will say, since a lot of you are younger certainly than I am, it is, you will have, this is going to be I envy you. The next decade in American journalism, it is going to be really hard, but I think when we come out of it, it's going to look really cool, and you all get a chance to do it, and I envy you.
Can I add one thing?
Yes,
Because
ma'am.
I think what I'll take the mic that's working. Okay. Does anybody have like that hand cleanser? No.
Heard about TV people, but
What? Just kidding. I want to play off of something you said. I think we're not in an evolution, we're in a revolution. And it is exciting because there are so many other jobs. You can't go into a job interview right now and go in as a single purpose person. I'm a writer. I'm just a writer. No, when you come to CBS, we want you to be able to shoot video. We want you to be a rounded person who can expand your journalistic base. So the opportunities, quite frankly, when all of us were starting out, there was a very limited tunnel. It's endless now, the opportunities. But the challenge is breaking through the cacophony of incoming to have an impact, to really break through.
And actually, that's a jump off to my next comment, thought, question, Missy. I'm going to let you follow up with that. So what suggestions do you have for journalists to increase their marketability? How do they break through? What are the types of either projects or skills that journalists need to acquire today to have their resume jump off the page of your hiring managers?
You know, I have long... Oh, am I holding the wrong one?
no.
Yes. Okay. Okay, to door number 3. Is any of them working? Okay. When somebody walks in my office for a job interview, I don't care. I can't curse because I know my press person's sitting here and she'll have a heart attack. But I do not care whether you went to Harvard, CCNY, community college. When somebody comes in, it is like a blind date. You feel the energy of a human being and their passion and their directness. So I really look for somebody who is driven, who has that thing that you can't put on a piece of paper, that when they walk out of my office, it's like I can dread a day where I'm like talking to 5 people. But really, at the end of the day, I'm inspired by that person who came and sat across from me. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for drive. I'm looking for inspirational. I'm looking for somebody who's not going to care how many hours they work that week. I think that how you come across in an interview, I think skill sets are really important, but your personality counts for about 85% if you're going to get that job. Matt?
Sorry.
Which one?
Looking for an AB. No. Wait, this works. Should we ditch them? Can you hear us? Okay. No. Okay. Look, I'd echo everything Susan said. I just wanted to add a couple of things that I was thinking as she was speaking. Journalistically, if you're what we unfortunately would call a content creator, I'm actually looking sometimes for something unique, something different, an original idea, a sourcing scoop insight that nobody else had. a visual idea that's unique and different that you've executed, that you've shown you can do. I've always felt when I was a reporter, and I think it's still true today, that many of the best stories are kind of off the beaten path. So I get people who come in and sometimes they think the thing to do is the same thing that the last 10 people I saw were doing. I want somebody who's a little bit apart from the herd, frankly, who's finding their own vein, their own coverage, and making a difference in their way. And I go back to Dean's point about ambition, too. You know, it helps if you can break news. It helps if you can write. But I also want to see your ideas. I think the other thing that's broadly true for a lot of people is I want these days people who are passionate about what we do and have ideas about how we should be doing it. We get a fair number of people who are at the Wall Street Journal because we're one of the big three, and I try to ask every job candidate, what are we doing wrong? What do you want to change? And the worst answer, but unfortunately it's the one I get the most, is, I like everything you do. I want people to challenge me. I want people we can learn from. We are in a period of reinvention and growth, and I not only do I want that for the leadership team and for all the journalists in the newsroom, I want people to bring things in and be willing to come into the journal and help us change it, which can be a challenge sometimes. So those are important things I just wanted to add.
You know, every great, can you hear me? Is this working?
Yeah.
Every great journalist I have worked with tries to be better than everybody else at least one thing. That one thing can be, you know, a craft. It can be you're the best writer around. It can be you know the most about law enforcement than anybody else. I think it's helpful to be really, really excellent at one thing. I want to make sure that doesn't lead people to too much narrow casting. That one thing could be just a type of writing, a great insight about a certain kind of subject, the culture, or anything else. So try to be good at one thing, and then I have a conflicting advice. Don't be narrow, which means be really good at one thing, but you should read. That seems like, you know, pretty pedestrian advice, but a lot of people, because journalists work really hard, don't read as much. You should read. You should understand the business we're in. People like me grew up in an era when you were discouraged from understanding the business. We were, you know, there was advertising, and anybody who did advertising had a disease and should stay on the other side of the wall. That's a very different era. You should understand the turmoil in the business. You should understand the possibilities in the business. Sometimes I find the people who are most naive about the news business, or the people who are in the business. You should get it. Partly because, to repeat what I said, you all are going to lead these institutions, all of our institutions, through this turmoil, and you're going to have a big say in what we look like when we come out on the other end. So you really ought to be damn sure you sort of understand what makes them tick now.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I mean, I think as well as these kind of core journalistic values, I think, you know, I mean, one of the things that's changed most dramatically, particularly on the kind of broadcast side, is just the technology. You know, it used to be, it wasn't so long ago, that to get a story out, it required probably 10 people to get a story onto there. You needed a giant truck and a big camera and a sound man, and someone had to kind of splice it all together. It was an incredibly complicated process. Like, all you need now to tell a story is a really good idea and a vision to tell it, and your phone. Like, that phone in the pocket, you could be broadcasting to the entire world in seconds from anywhere in the world, telling any story you want to tell. So I think you know, in part, my advice to all the young journalists out there is just like, get out there. Get out there. There's so many stories you can tell, and there's so many kind of ways that you can tell us. You actually don't need any of us at all to tell a great story, and to actually have meaningful impact. If you're on the ground in the right place at the right time, you can be a world beater.
But the other thing I think for all of us, we are, and you know, in the networks where we were so segmented and siloed, we're now a 24/7 brand. And for all of us, and that creates great opportunities, but we are organizations that are dynamically changing. you know, a linear broadcast is a digital broadcast, is a piece of news that breaks on our digital side that becomes the lead of the evening news. We all are morphing and breaking down the silos. I think that the digital universe grew up next to the linear, and what's most important now for all of us is the walls of Jericho are coming down, and creates opportunities, but it makes us uniquely new organizations that have a constant stream of information. And there is no news cycle anymore. It is just constant. And people are better for it, they're more informed, and there are more jobs.
Can I add one?
Yep, please.
Yeah, the only other thing I was going to add is for all of the ways that our institutions are going to change, and I think in the end that change will be for the better, I also think it's helpful to have a sense of history. I think, you know, as a young journalist, you know, because I was so starstruck by all the institutions that are represented here, I think I read everything. and the one thing you realize when you read so much about the history of journalism, and also just the history period, is almost everything, emphasis on almost, has already happened before. And almost every debate has already been debated. One of the things that struck me when we were trying to reorganize the newsroom and start thinking differently about the front page of the New York Times is, you know, at the New York Times, the lead of the paper was sacrosanct. It had to look a certain way, and it had to feel a certain way. It had to be written a certain way. And I think I've now come to understand that that was ridiculous. That was created probably 50 or 100 years ago. And it was probably created because, you know, 200 stories landed on a copy desk at the same time every night. And the only way you could actually close the damn paper was if everybody wrote pretty much the same. And then you'd maybe give a couple of people license to do it a little bit differently. So over 50 or 100 years, that's how we do it. And to me, I would put that in the category of, once you understand that, the kind of tradition you can shed, you don't have to tell those stories exactly the same way. It's completely liberating. I mean, we have a first-person account on the front page this morning by Wesley Morris, who's a genius, which is about what Toni Morrison meant to him. That would have never have been on the front page 10 years ago. And I think that's a realization that some of the constraints that were on us, once you understand how they got placed there, aren't really necessary. Which I think, to me, when that struck me, it just sort of exploded my head.
That's a great example to kind of expand this part of the conversation of what you all are doing, what your brands and your news organizations are doing to attract new audiences, and particularly on digital platforms. How has the news brand had to evolve to keep up with these various audience and other consumer demands, from, you know, commercial products that, you know, some organizations are selling products, to how you build up your newscast? And clearly you guys have the streaming service, so tell us a little bit about how
Well,
you've
I mean,
adapted.
I think that one of the things is, at all points during the day, there isn't a single person that doesn't really know, if you're attentive, what's going on. You know, it's okay. There are, I don't want you to see my notes. No, I'm just kidding. Most people know a little bit about everything. So the organizations now, there's, you know, papers and digital websites have an obligation of kind of giving me as much about everything as they can. For an evening news broadcast, though, we're coming at it from a different way. How do we add context and perspective? I'm just leaving it. And then, how do we add context and perspective, and how are we integrating into the digital world? We have a series that's running right now on CBS This Morning, on the evening news, about unconscious bias in police departments. You know, an innovative idea that Kim Godwin, our EVP News, and also a senior producer on the morning news, Jonathan Blakely, came up with. This is an original idea. So in the New World Order, it's things that give context and perspective, and then we're running them across all platforms. You know, CBSN is 4 years old. It's on 20 platforms. So our reach is much bigger. And that's the evolution of how we are breaking down the silos. And there's, you know, when you go out and you do a story, you shoot extra elements so that the evening news isn't the same as the morning news version, and the CBSN version may be a 20-minute version of what was a 4-minute version. So it's a very exciting time for us to share big stories, unique stories, provocative stories that give context and perspective to the day's news. That's what our hope is. Did I answer that question?
You sure did.
Okay.
James?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a very exciting time. It's just a very exciting time to tell stories. You know, I mean, you know, we used to have to tell them in this kind of very constricted format. We had a morning show and an evening show. We had a Nightline, but now, you know, we get to tell these. You know, we now have a show on Facebook Watch every day that 1 million people watch every single day. We'll find the news that way. You know, we're obviously going on every sort of social media platform there is, and I think it gives us an opportunity to come at a story. You know, when you look at the kind of myriad ways that we covered the terrible news from the weekend, and how from, you know, just telling that kind of basic news story to all the analysis that kind of rolled out over the coming days. You know, we told that in 10-second bites, and minute-long bites, and 10-minute-long bites, and hour-long sections as well. You know, and I think, you know, and that is just an incredible opportunity for all of you to kind of, you know, to find the way that you like telling stories best, and to tell those. But it's exciting for us all to do that.
I think a way to think about it, the Wall Street Journal, I hope, is a brand that stands for a couple of common traits. I hope it stands for strong factual reporting, for integrity in the news process, for a view of the world that's not limited to, but sort of through business and finance and markets, because those are big forces that move the whole world and really inform a lot of things and can be very broadly interpreted. Follow the money is, you know, one of the oldest journalistic maxims. But technology and audience data and the other tools we now have actually give us the opportunity with those core values to present many Wall Street journals to many different kinds of audiences and people. And so we have, for instance, the last year done a few partnerships. We teamed with Apple News Plus, I think a little controversially, but in the hopes that the Apple News Plus product is going to reach a big swath of audience that might not find their way normally to our website. And we see tremendous results with some of the stories on that. I think we got an extra 1 million people who read a big story we did on Hong Kong this week who came in through Apple News Plus. Our head of video, Anthony Galloway, is here, and he's headed this initiative we're doing with Twitter, where I think we're doing 8 or 9 videos a day on Twitter now. We've teamed with Bloomberg. We're really looking with the base of the newsroom and the journalism we've got, how to have different people experience us in different ways. And I don't think all the partnerships and all the things we try are going to work necessarily, but you've got to be, today, to succeed, you've got to have a newsroom that's constantly willing to innovate, try things, think about formats, think about audiences, think about new ways to get your material out there. And hopefully you bring the brand values with you as you do that, and people feel that. But I think, you know, it is a more crowded world, and you have to kind of blow your horn a little bit and not wait for people to come to you. But the opportunities to do that in different ways are so much greater than they used to be.
Probably the biggest change for us in terms of storytelling is one that's going to seem quaint to my two panelists who are in television, which is visual journalism. I mean, we we weren't first with that. You guys didn't. But I mean, picture it: a traditional newspaper story was words and still photography, and that's just not the case anymore. I mean, we, in addition to having an investigative and enterprise unit that's central to the paper, we've also created a visual investigations unit whose job it is to do something that none of us knew how to do, at least none of us in our newsroom knew how to do, which is to do sort of forensics investigations and collecting all available visuals and data to tell a story. One example was the story about the guy who spent time with the Saudi leader who was accused in the Khashoggi murder. And what the team did was the Saudis were trying to create distance between themselves and him. So we essentially went in and found every photograph or video we could find of the leader of MBS, and found this guy standing in the background of like 20 of them. And we just showed his proximity to the leader, which completely defied the notion that they had no relationship. That's probably not as new to you all, but for us, that's a whole dramatic new line of reporting. So, I mean, that's to me is the best example for us.
Do you remember when you guys put out the sort of a cardboard of viewers? So you know, I've been I was delivered to CBS in a shipping bag from a maternity ward. I've been in television my whole life. But I was so excited by what the Times was doing that I live on a block that has like houses in the city. I went and I stole the cardboard. I got 5 of them, and I even stole one from Howard Stringer's house because I thought it was so great that a newspaper, you know, that you were moving into this generation, and so I thought it was very exciting.
Well,
I have 5 of them. I was going to put them on eBay and see if they were worth.
can I have one? You have 5? Yes. Anyway, so as we transition to the next panel, I just wanted to say this is my last moderation, or I guess panel as NABJ president, so I'm really excited that you all came. Look at the full house, so thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And so I just wanted to say that what would it be like if I had the opportunity to meet with all these folks, which I've met with all of them, throughout the last 4 years of being president, and I just had those meetings. With NABJ, it's about creating pathways and access to opportunity, and this is really, you know, what this panel was about. So I challenge the future leadership. I hope we have a Future of News panel next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, because really it's about breaking down communication, right? And just so that people can connect and be connected to each other. So as we you know, make our way off, and you're already standing, maybe 1 or 2 of you, or even all of you, might want to just briefly share some insights. And I think this is one of the overarching questions is black journalists. It's not so much that we stay to safe harbors, but that we are not always brought into the pipelines for those executive level positions. What are things that the news industry can do? It can be your organization or others to really encourage, and if not yourselves, take the mantle to lift up and find opportunities to make sure that your executive ranks are more diverse. But what can the media industry do better? Because I think oftentimes what we do, not just at NABJ, but the other diversity orgs, we work so hard to train people up. We have this week of training, we have Media Institute training, as if it's somehow our responsibility to get that job, that we have to be better or work harder. But really we want to have this conversation about and with the industry and what the commitments are going to be to make sure that newsrooms are better reflective of not just the current population, but in 25 years, a majority minority country. So specifically around management, and that's the area where we see a lot of representation on air. We see, you know, some of the prime beats. We see opportunities for journalists of color and black journalists. But we at NABJ, we want to really try to help prepare our members for those roles in management positions.
Well, I'll take it since I'm in the first chair. I'm exceedingly proud of the evolution and revolution that has happened at CBS. You know, the management structure at CBS is incredibly inclusive. If you walk into our main newsroom in New York, it's blow away. You know, as I took the mantle of this job, I call it the P word, President. That, you know, daunting as it was, I looked out and I saw what was an incredibly inclusive group. I think where we are really working hard is on the top broadcast levels. You know, the executive producers, the senior broadcast producers. And I think the way that we are working is literally having workshops, and we have something called the CBS Institute, where we are looking at people and saying, what do you want to do ultimately? And if they do say that, we're giving them paths to that. As far as the management of CBS News goes, I am like thrilled at what our table looks like. and our newsroom looks like, and our bureaus look like. But the tectonic plates began shifting 2 years ago. They're not going to stop, and I think that's a good thing.
As somebody who leads an organization that's not always great at this, to be frank, historically has not always been great at this, I think you have to promote people, which I've tried to do in the last couple of years. You have to put people in jobs where they have authority. And then I think you have to do what I think is the hardest thing to do for institutions, and I think it's a sign of my age that I see this as hard. You have to shut up and listen to them. You sort of have to understand that the reason you put different people with different backgrounds into positions where they could be in your office when big decisions are made is because they're not going to say exactly the same thing you would say, and you have to listen to them. And one of the things I always thought when I was a young journalist that if I ever, and I did not aspire to be the leader of a newsroom, to be frank. It always feels like a big accident. But when I was a young journalist, I figured the bosses didn't seem to listen to me enough. And now that I'm a boss, I get that suddenly. But I also realized that it's wrong. That you not only need to listen, you need to seek people out who might disagree with you. The whole reason to have a diverse newsroom, and again, I say this as somebody who leads one that has struggled with it over the years, but the real reason to have a diverse newsroom is to have a newsroom filled with people who have different ways of looking at things than you do, who have different experiences. I'm proud of Wesley Morris having a first-person piece on the front page, whose experience with reading Toni Morrison as a young kid in a house that did not have a lot of high literature in it, and what that meant to him. That was, I think that's a transformational moment, and I think you just have to shut up and listen.
I would echo both of those, and I'd add two things from my perspective and from the perspective of the Journal, another organization that really has not historically been very good on this front. On the managerial level, really, and this is the responsibility of the senior team, but it starts with me, accountability for managers on recruitment, retention, promotion of a diverse workforce, and tying that really to job performance and clear implementation of plans has to be there. You have to be an organization that has those things. Because one of the problems, frankly, that D&I programs run into is everybody has good intentions, but nobody puts their money where their mouth is or carries it through. And everybody can feel good about what they declare. I mean, the Wall Street Journal, with some good reason, historically took a lot of comfort in saying, well, we're a meritocratic institution, and okay, but we all looked the same, and we all came from the same kind of a background, so obviously something wasn't right. So there's a leadership component, but I think there's another thing that's important, and it has to come from the organization, but it also has to come from people joining the organization. This is partly what diversity also has to be about, which is we've talked a lot about how news culture is changing and technology is changing what we do and storytelling opportunities are different. Right along with that, as the country changes, we're at a moment of cultural transformation in our newsrooms where we have ways of doing things and certain things that we've learned over time that are smart and that make sense. And we have a lot of ways of doing things that with time became very encrusted or don't necessarily seem to have a reason to be that way anymore, and we need people to help us rethink them and reinvent them and create a new culture, create a newsroom where people are free to bring their whole selves and their whole ideas, however they want that to be, by the way. They have to have their expectations. I have expectations that I want people to contribute, but I don't have an expectation of exactly how people should contribute. So that's partly on leadership, but that's on the cultures to create those kind of welcoming cultures as we reinvent ourselves there. Genuinely, it is one of the really exciting things happening, I think, probably in all our organizations, and one of the really exciting things for coming into an organization today, but it certainly can be tough and have its moments.
Yeah, and just to finish up here, I mean, I think I'm very proud of the work we've done at ABC News in terms of the face we present to the world, and the journalists and the work that Barbara and Mary and Alicia have been doing. They're all here in this room, and we have a big presence here to keep that going. But I think, I think there's obviously been rightly a significant debate about the people making the decisions, and I think, I take that as a personal responsibility, as a personal mission. We've got to fix that. And we know we have a ton of work to do there, Glad to see Marie Nelson here. She came in as an SVP this week. She just started on Monday to help us. Welcome, Marie. And actually, Marie's going to kind of help us with some of this, because it's a kind of significant. It's a significant cultural thing. But I think in this era, in this political era, a story kind of like El Paso, you have to have an organization that's properly reflective of the community to tell that story properly. Otherwise, it's impossible. You just can't do it properly. And I think we take that responsibility very seriously, and we're gonna fix it.
That's an excellent way to end this segment. Thank you so much, and we're going to have our next panel come on.
Thanks, Sean.
Excellent. Do not leave, because we have the magnificent managers on tap. And as our fabulous dynamic team here exits the stage, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm just like pushing everybody off.
Good luck with this.
Thank you. I want to introduce to you our next round of panelists. Ms. Marcia Cook from Vice, SVP, Content Community Strategy. Arminda Marquez Gonzalez, Miami Herald Media Company, President and Publisher, Executive Director. Janelle Rodriguez, NBC News SVP Editorial. Jerry Walsh, Nexstar Broadcasting VP of Local Content Development. Janice Ware, the Atlanta Voice Publisher. And Don Durfee, Managing Editor, News Strategy at Reuters. Come on up. Have a seat, make yourselves comfortable. I know this is the old switcheroo, but we have a lot to talk about here, because these are the people who are most likely going to meet and greet you when you bring your lovely face to the door. These are the people who are making those mid-level management decisions. And I want to start off, I want to know, first off, how's business? 2, with chaos, there is amazing opportunity. And I want to ask you, what are your company's key priorities in making sure that this next generation is in the process of progress? I'll start with Marcia. Advice.
Okay. Key priorities. I've been in this business for quite some time. Started in local news, ran our Asia bureaus at CBS. I still say our, you heard that, for a long time. And now at Vice, we are dedicated to youth and storytelling. When you look at our diverse talent, whether it be producers, editors, on camera, we are in the business of telling stories from the perspective of a young audience. So the people that we hire, whether they are behind the camera or in front of the camera, are young, are diverse. I could go into all of the things that I love about the talented staff that we have, but it's about narrative storytelling and not being confined to limits of time, which allows us to tell bigger stories. I'll pass the mic.
I would say that our mission really is really the same as it's been for our more than 115 years, and that's really to be the voice of the community, the watchdog, people lose sight of the fact, I think, sometimes that while the national news may be the sexy part, what really impacts the way that you live your life is what your local government does. It's how much taxes you pay, it's how well or not your kids are educated, it's how the quality of your water, it's whether they're corrupt, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's really where our value proposition is at the Miami Herald and on Level Herald. And so we have just doubled down, really, even as we have, like everyone else in the industry has kind of shrunk. We've doubled down on the accountability mission work, and I think I can proudly say that we actually have a bigger team dedicated to that today than we did when we had 4 times the number of people working here. So
yeah, streamlining. I mean, you have to do it, and even at a network like NBC, it's a situation where like you have to get more out of your buck to make it happen.
Well, at first, congratulations to Miami Herald on their incredible
Absolutely.
Jeffrey Epstein
Thank you
reporting.
so much.
I mean, I think it's great. So all that. I mean, I have to say, I'm incredibly proud to work at an organization. While so many news organizations are contracting, we are expanding daily. We are hiring constantly looking for talent, which is why we're here, and it's part of an important reason of our mission in being here. But the mission for us always is story first, the right story on the right platform. We pursue the greatest journalism that we can every day, and what we're looking for our correspondents when they come to us pitching is what's exclusive? How can we end this day with NBC has exclusively learned, or an original video, something, a character that is original, something that's going to break through. And we worry about that first, and we launch on that first, and then we think about what platform is it going to be on. And that could be anything from nightly news and the broadcast network, Today's Show, Meet the Press, MSNBC, Snapchat, streaming, Instagram, but always it's journalism first.
I think this is a really interesting week to have this conversation after what we witnessed and experienced. And my company, we have a television station in El Paso, Texas. We have a television station in Dayton, Ohio. So you know how our weekend went and how our crews are right now. And I would point out, we watched hours of network news on this, but remember, the first people on the ground were the local reporters. That's right. They got the call on a Saturday afternoon to say, we need you to come in here. We need to go into wall-to-wall breaking news coverage to talk about local issues. They got the call in the middle of the night on a Saturday into Sunday and didn't come off the air until 1 o'clock on Monday afternoon, providing coverage in Dayton, Ohio. That, to me, is what Nexstar and who we are as a company is all about. We're about local. We're about how do we service the communities that we're in. That was the vision of the founder 23 years ago, and it's the vision of every single television station that we have today. And the business is good. We're continuing to grow. We're trying to grow even further. We'll see how that goes over the next couple of weeks and months. But the reliance of local media, especially in points of crisis like El Paso, like Dayton, Ohio, those are the reporters that were there first. And with respect to my friends at the networks, those are the reporters that will be there in the days, the weeks, the months to come. Because now those communities have changed forever. Just like it changed for our station and our city in Las Vegas after the Las Vegas shooting. Just like it did in Virginia Beach and our station in Virginia Beach that went through that not too long ago. So it's a great opportunity to say, hey, if you want to come work in journalism, you want to be impactful, you want to help people, these are great jobs to have, and it's great jobs on the local level as well.
I am the second generation publisher of the Atlanta Voice newspaper, which is a community newspaper in the city of Atlanta. We have as our motto, a people without a voice cannot be heard. So we pride ourselves on telling the other side of the story and telling the same story in a different way and how it's going to affect our people. So we're proud of our history. We look forward to the future. We're making all kinds of changes to be as diverse in our newsrooms as possible. And we're transitioning into this digital space, which is very new to me. But I do have a young staff of people who have come in to make changes and introduce things, including changing my logo and my color scheme when I went on vacation. So that was pretty interesting. So we're thriving, we're surviving, we're struggling at the same time, but we're excited about where we are and we're excited about the future.
That's great. So our story is a little bit different. For those of you who don't know Reuters, we're the world's biggest news agency. We operate in about 200 countries around the world. We have 2,500 journalists. And so when we think about what makes us different, one of the key things is the fact that we're global, right? It allows us to sort of mobilize our global resources on the biggest stories that really matter. Sort of tell those for audiences here in the US and Europe, but also tell stories from the US for that global audience. So what we're focusing on is how can we really leverage that global ability and be nimble about it. So when it works, it can yield some really outstanding journalism. This year we won a Pulitzer for this story on Myanmar. It's the story of the Rohingya, which is, you probably all know, is a major human rights crisis, the persecution of this minority group. So with that story, we were able to rely not just on the reporters who were there in Myanmar, but our global enterprise team who did investigations, our graphics team based in New York, our reporters in Washington who were able to sort of report the U.S. side of that story and the diplomatic implications, our photographers. We flew in some of our best photographers to work on that story. And when we do that, we can do some really exciting work. And we'd love to have you guys join us. So thanks.
So what is clear to us is that now all news agencies, whether they are print or broadcast or digital, we're all visual. And that process of inclusion within who you are and what you will become is ever growing, ever changing. So what does that look like for a newspaper? What does that look like for a weekly? How do you incorporate the digital into, the wiring of who you have become?
So for a weekly newspaper, it allows us to get our voice in front of people on a daily and hourly basis, where in the past you produced one paper on Thursday and it was delivered on Friday. Today we can actually tell a story that's breaking news along with the news stations because we have the same information. So it's just telling it in a different format.
And I guess as the only other,
Yes.
print person here, I'll say that actually we haven't considered ourselves to be just a newspaper in at least a decade. The reality is that we are a digital news organization that produces 2 newspapers at the end of the day, and that's exactly, if you go to my news meetings, that's what you would see happen when it used to be like the full focus of what we did. And so video is absolutely key to what we do. We have 3, I'm proud to say we have 3 documentaries. They're Emmy winning. And so after the big earthquake in Haiti, we went in there specifically to tell a story only visually. It's a key component of all the investigations that we do, including the Epstein perversion of justice series. And quite frankly, you have to be in that space now. I mean, we all know because that's the way that the consumers want to consume news and information, as evidenced, of course, by, like Vice and other, video-only, really just very visual-only enterprises. So I think that I don't think you'll find a traditional news organization that's not doing that.
I think when you think about Vice, it's about not only the narrative and the extraordinary storytelling and the diversity of our talent, it's how we utilize the entire ecosystem of the company. So if you look at the El Chapo trial, you'll find that the podcast and the subsequent coverage by a young man named Keegan morphed into other opportunities within studios. We have a film studio. The same is true for the Fire Festival. That began as a digital news story that then became a documentary. One of the 19 nominations Vice has garnered this year for the 2nd time in a row. So it's building a sustainable newsroom, but also looking at how we can use our content throughout the company. So I think that's one of our elements to the secret sauce.
It is. It's so important to have that secret sauce. And it's clear that we are living in a world, and certainly in a nation, where local news deserts exist. I mean, we see them as more and more newspapers are going the way of the last century. I mean, it's incredible. So what are you doing to pound the pavement to ensure that communities, not just communities of color, not just communities in rural areas, in some smaller cities. What are you doing to make sure those people are reached, whether digitally or through, other means?
I mean, as a national organization, we are not local news and don't pretend to be local news, but it's a high priority for us to make sure that we have our correspondents dispatched across the country to be able to tell the stories. All stories ultimately are local, but for the few that come out of Washington, but all of those are local as well. So for example, during the start of the trade war last year, we had one of our correspondents who really spent vast amounts of time in the Midwest telling the story of the trade war through the eyes of the farmers, because that's where the first pulses of what was happening began, and that story has continued. I mean, particularly, you look at soybean farmers. A foreign trade policy can be incredibly abstract, so you have to go on the local level to be able to tell those stories. Our road warriors are embeds where we've dispatched a mass amount of people and really have them living in states across the country, as well as crisscrossing regionally and focusing on issues to be able to tell the micro story of what's happening on a national level. And frankly, those stories are just more interesting than trying to cover it from 50,000 feet when you're a national news organization.
So McClatchy, which is a parent company of the Miami Herald, will host in a really interesting collaboration with Google, in which you may have read about Compass, where we're actually launching 3 products in news deserts over the next couple of years. And the first one was announced in Youngstown just shortly after the announcement of the longtime newspaper there folding. And the idea is to try. It's going to be fully owned and operated by McClatchy, but it's not running with, it's not part of the Miami Herald, it's not part of, so it's a separate experiment. And the idea is, to try to create an experiment with different models that would be sustainable for those communities to provide news and information, and to also play with what that model should look like. We have ideas about what news and information should be and what readers want, but is that everything that we're delivering, is that really what people want? And so I think it's going to be a really interesting experiment. Like I said, Youngstown's already been announced and it's going to launch, and there'll be 2 more to really try to figure out and play with some of these models and see what might work.
I think this brings up a couple things that we're doing right now, and I would encourage you to go to borderreport.com. We launched that less than a month ago. It is actually based out of El Paso and our station there, and a team out of Austin, Texas. And it solely focuses in on the border. Stories on the border, stories on both sides of the border. Not just what you're hearing in the evening news, not just what you're seeing on national websites. These are local people that they're in bed, and they're doing the journalism along the line. They're veterans. They're veterans of these communities, and they've seen their communities change, evolve over time. So that's one opportunity that we're looking at. I would also say that a couple years ago we expanded our Washington, D.C. bureau. The system really has changed. We always got this from the networks. Now Nexstar has a Washington, D.C. bureau, which its sole job is to talk to the local lawmakers. Our friends at the network are great, but they're not going to go ask the congressman from Utica, New York, what he thinks about a specific issue going on in the community. And that's what our team is there to do. 13 people. We just expanded our team. We're hiring one, by the way. Anybody want to work in Washington, D.C.? We got an opening right now. A great time to go work at that operation. But I would also say to you, the company has 26 capital bureaus in state capitals around the country. This is areas that it really used to be newspaper specific. There used to be a lot of wire services and stuff like that in the capitals. We have now been embedded MMJs in Austin, Texas, in Albany, New York, in Springfield, Illinois, in Sacramento, California, that are servicing and doing stories about the issues being debated in state houses that just don't get that coverage right now. And we think that that's a very, very valuable resource, not only broadcast-wise, but on digital, because every one of these components has a digital component to it as well.
Well, speaking of hiring, and I'm going to begin with Don, I'd have to ask you, so what are you looking for? I mean, here you have a diverse group of incredible journalists who have lived all over the world. I know many of them, don't I? What is it that you are looking for when you come to NABJ? I mean, aside from the obvious.
Yeah, so of course we're looking for people who have sort of drive, curiosity, tenacity, integrity, right? Those are givens, right? As a global news organization, we're interested in people who speak foreign languages, people who have sort of deep subject matter expertise. And I will say we are really looking to increase the diversity of our staff, right? So globally, we're a highly diverse organization. We have people from all over the world working for us. Washington, D.C. is filled with people from many countries. But if you think of our U.S. operation in particular, one of the benchmarks that I would use is, does your newsroom, the makeup of your newsroom, is it representative of the community that you serve, right? And on that score, we've fallen short, to be honest, right? I think we've made a lot of improvement there, but we've got some work to do, and we recognize that. And so we've been working really closely with NABJ and other organizations. We have scholarships that we've done with NABJ, fellowships, and we're constantly trying out new things there. So we are looking for people who are curious and engaged and have a real commitment to do great journalism.
How active, and this is to the whole panel, how active are you looking for that next round of leadership to come from here? One of my colleagues was brilliant in making this assessment, and in order to hit people with the possibility to be the next SVP, to be the next president, it has to be in their face or realm of possibility. So what are you doing to reach out and reach in so that a Kim Godwin and Ingrid Cyprian-Matthews, the range of possibility in your jobs is open, the pathway is clear?
I'll take that, because there was one thing that came up earlier this morning. I think it comes up a lot, which is there are many people probably in this room who want to be on television, but I will tell you, it is a producer's market all day long. And the pathway to getting up into these senior management roles is as a producer. I know not just NBC, but many of the news organizations are actively, heavily seeking talented producers on up. We currently have a very senior role on the digital space. My colleague called me on the way down here and said, can you go find me a head of blank, blank, blank. I can't actually say what it is at the moment, but as I'm walking around looking for someone at the and this is a very senior, probably VP level job, all the way down to producers. So particularly for the younger folks in the room, many of whom are coming out of school, this conversation might partially be head scratching, because you're coming out of school, you know how to shoot, write, edit, the whole package as you're coming out. There's a lot more opportunity behind the camera than there is in front of the camera, and for those who passion is to be in front of the camera, go for it, live it, and embody it. But if you're kind of unsure what your path is, but you think it's shinier in front, I will tell you there's a lot more job opportunity behind the camera, and if you want to run a news organization, that is the only way. We have to pipeline people up through the producer ranks.
And I'd just add in there, yes, we're always looking for producers. Every market probably has a producer that's open right now. But I'd also come back and say, we're looking for people to grow within our organization. We'd like you to start in a small market, San Angelo, Texas. It's lovely this time of the year in San Angelo. Work your way all the way up to San Francisco, California, and maybe some higher markets in the days and weeks and years to come. We want you to come within Nexstar. We have a great track record of moving people up from within our organization. And from a standpoint of our newsrooms are not as diverse. And I appreciate you saying that earlier.
I'm just dying to ask why. I know this is off topic, but
I
maybe
think that's a good reason why we've been coming here for the last several years, and the company's been invested in recruiting and working with NABJ and having conversations like this. And we need to get those skill sets of the people that are in this room into our organization. I would also tell you that with our group, you work on a lot of projects. And so we have a lot of mid-level managers. You might not be the news director, but if you're the EP, you're the assistant news director, you're going to work with someone like myself. You're going to work with somebody like Susan Tully, our Senior VP of Local Content, and you're going to have a one-on-one relationship with those individuals. You want something like that if you're coming into an organization, because those are the individuals that can help move you up within the organization going forward. Because we have many people that have come on to us and they've covered something as simple as the Super Bowl. Next year they're going to the Olympics. Next year they're covering the elections. Next year they're an assistant news director. And that's the path forward, and that's what we want to do with every employee that comes into our company.
What I would tell you is that the Atlanta Voice has a history of being diverse, and we're excited about that. My father had white photographers back in the 70s. So we have welcomed that kind of engagement over the last 54 years. What we're looking for right now is somebody to help us expand our digital space. So it's one thing to be able to produce, and we're building out our own, what do you call it, a video space in the back, you know. So I've got, where we used to have a printing press, we now have an open space. So that 2,000 space is being converted so that we can actually be able to produce our own videos and podcasts and everything in that space. But we need to have somebody who can help us, you know, push it out and monetize it, because it's one thing to be able to do it, it's another thing to be able to sustain it. And if you don't have, from a business standpoint, ability to be able to afford to pay the people to do the work, it's not going to be there long. So that's what we're looking for right now.
I just have to ask this, because sometimes I think people, and you can answer the question or answer the one before, but what comes to mind is that people in leadership roles, diversity is a hot button issue and has been for the last 10 years. I just want to make sure everyone is clear on why diversity matters. And I think in just like one or two words, I'm going to go down the line and you tell me why it matters.
Well, since I have the mic in my hand, the fact is, if you don't have people from every segment of society that can represent those segments of society, you're not hearing the story from their vantage point. And it's important that you're able to produce a story that can do both or all.
Access, access, access. You cannot tell those kinds of stories if you don't have people who understand them innately.
And I would say, you know, Miami's been at the forefront of a cultural shift. We were 20 years ago where everybody's kind of going in the next 10 years. So I would just say in the most practical sense, like, it makes business sense, because you cannot tell those stories if you don't have people who have cultural nuance, who can speak the language, who understand, who bring context. Otherwise, you're just like a foreign correspondent landing in a foreign land and really half understanding what's going on.
I would say you want the best and the brightest in the newsroom, period. And if you're hiring the best and the brightest, you will automatically be hiring a diverse group of people.
We must reflect the communities that we serve. And that's from management to on air, to the producers, to the stories that we cover, right across the line. And that's what diversity means for us. Make sure that you reflect the communities that you serve, over 100 for us across the country.
Yeah, I think simply you're going to be missing many of the best ideas, right? A room that is full of people who look the same and think the same backgrounds, generally speaking, are going to come up with the same kinds of ideas. And in news, it's all about the creative thing. It's zigging when everybody else is zagging, and it's essential for us.
And I just have to ask, retention. I mean, keeping the best people at your various companies, I would presume that's somewhat challenging in a diverse workspace with so much competition out there, really. What do you do to make sure that the people you've trained, the people you've accessed, stay with you?
You provide them with opportunities consistently. You allow them to pitch great ideas and take that idea maybe outside of their digital space, if they're a writer or if they're a producer or a host, and you give them an opportunity to maybe develop a film idea and pitch it to the head of our film studio. You're constantly giving all of your employees an opportunity to really spread their wings and have a chance to do something else, and that when they see those opportunities, they want to stay with the company. They realize that that is absolutely a place where they can grow.
But a lot of times there is only so high they get. There is that glass ceiling, even still, in some newsrooms. So what is your best advice to those of us who want to just pierce it, but we want to work with you to do so, and to do so with aplomb? I'm trying to give some good tips here.
With aplomb.
With aplomb.
I mean, I would just say, first of all, I used to take like people leaving really personally, and it's good that Dean Baquet and Matt are out of here because they're mostly responsible for taking my people. Oh, and Marty Barron at the Washington Post.
Being one
so
of them.
not that I'm naming names, and I love them all, and they're wonderful. But at the end of the day, it's not a terrible thing to say, you know what? You have, if you're tapped out here and you feel like you've done all you've done, we have prepared you to be able to step into your next job somewhere else. So now instead of like the parent, crying over their kid going to college, I kind of feel like they're gonna leave. But my value proposition is I promise you that you're gonna do the best work that you can possibly do in your career at the Miami Herald while you're working with us. You will have those opportunities because we have great editors. It's like shooting fish in a barrel in the city, I mean, there's a lot of news stories. And I also would say, I always tell people, be flexible, because even though it's great to have a really linear path about what you want to do, I would have still been a reporter sitting at my desk because that was what I was going to do. And then somebody said, hey, you should try editing. And I was like, no, I don't want to go to dark side. And they're like, no, you can try it for 3 months. And if you hate it, you can come. And it's great. And it worked out. So I think you also have to be flexible as much as you can have like this path that you think is the thing that you're going to do.
Yeah, and I think that advice about, you have to be able to let people go if you're in a position of power and authority and management, that if you do not have any further opportunity, and of course you should be providing opportunity, trying to keep people engaged, looking for them if they're tapped out in their current job, is there something else they could be doing short or long term? But if they hit the point where you can only promote so many people in a given week or month or year, and if they truly have tapped out, the best thing I think you can do professionally as a mentor and a leader is to let them go on to the next opportunity, because sometimes you may tap out here, but the door is opened over there, and instead of holding someone back in an effort to overly retain, I would say, letting them go is actually the best for them in terms of growing that pipeline of people. And ultimately, I think when you do that as a culture, people come back. People come back.
And you welcome them with open arms.
And you welcome them with open arms, because they don't have to burn down the bridge to leave you. It doesn't have to be a messy breakup, right? And so while you should, I think, put everything into retaining people and providing opportunity, the letting go, I think, is just as important. And they do end up coming back. I think this is why we all end up working with each other again and again and again.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant point to make, that you just kind of don't burn your bridges, young people, because invariably you will work with people again and again and again. And on that note, I hate that we can't talk any further, but that other panel, steadily, we're losing our audience. Fabulous people, thanks for being here. You fabulous panel, thank you for joining us and agreeing to be here. NABJ is so excited you are here, and I hope that you enjoyed the discussion. Thank you.